Hello, everyone. David Sparks here for the Mac Power Users. Stephen Hackett isn't here. He's still on sabbatical, but that doesn't mean we can't still make great shows. I got one of my favorite people here today. Welcome to the show, Chris Bailey.
Hey, buddy. How you doing?
Good. It's so nice to be catching up with you. You haven't been on the show in a long time.
No.
For people who don't know Chris, according to the Wall Street Journal, he is the most productive man in the universe. Is that, I forget, something like that, Chris?
I don't know if universe is the geographic boundary that they've defined, but something like that. I don't really know. You know, these outlets, they give these blurbs every once in a while, and somebody at the publishing house says, "Oh, that's a great snippet. Let's use that and everywhere." And so then that follows you around.
Yes, it is everywhere. Yeah. Well, Chris wrote an excellent book years ago called The Productivity Project, and he tried out a bunch of productivity myths on himself and then wrote a book about it. Like, what happens if I wake up every day at 4 a.m. and what happens every day if I don't know. You had a whole bunch of different ones. And it's one of my favorite books to give to people interested in productivity because there's a bunch of stuff in there, a bunch of little experiments. And for a lot of people trying to figure this stuff out, it gives them ideas. It's just like a kind of a nice list of them. And Chris and I have become friends over the years. Chris is a huge Mac nerd. You've been on the Mac Power Users before, but it's been years. And you've written many books in the meantime. My favorite of which, frankly, is your most recent one called Calm. I think Calm is such a great book. And I guess we can get into that at some point because it has caused a transformation in my journaling. Like, I don't think I've told you about this, Chris, but you've changed a couple of my workflows.
Have I gotten into your head?
Yes, you are. I have a little Chris Bailey in my head saying, analog isn't so bad. Maybe you should try it. Sparky.
Does he look like a devil or an angel in your head?
Oh, absolutely an angel. Absolutely.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, as long as I got that glow.
And he's got that like cool thing with his hair that you do. So that works. That works for you.
I love it.
Chris is a Canadian friend of the show. So we can dispense with all the friendly Canadian jokes, but you are a very friendly Canadian. Let's just say
that's good to hear.
Yeah.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. And Chris is in the midst of working on a new book. He's starting doing a video course. He's got all this technology he's using right now, and it's really kind of developing. We were talking about it on one of our friend calls, and I'm like, you know what, Chris? When Steven's out of town, you and I got to get on the horn and talk about everything you're up to and how you're using all this Apple gear to pull it off. The video course, by the way, is a new thing for you, right?
Yeah. And I thought it would be done by now, but because I had no idea what was involved with the video course, and I want to do one that's at a certain caliber and stuff. But yeah, it's essentially going to be called The Art of Prioritization. Kind of productivity, bread and butter, tactical stuff. So still in the works as I polish up this latest book number 4. Which I haven't shared the title anywhere, but I feel a certain affinity with you, David, with the Mac Power Users folks. I've been nerding out like you're saying about Mac stuff since I can remember. I remember being at the gym while I was doing the productivity project before we had talked, before we had met. Listening to Mac Power Users back then. So
I love that.
I feel comfortable sharing this today.
So we're going to have news on this show. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I guess.
This is amazing.
If anybody wants it.
The new Chris Bailey book. I mean, that's like J.K. Rowling's has a new book.
Wow.
Of productivity. You're J.K.
It's like J.K. Rowling, but without all the controversy. Yeah.
That's true.
I'm thinking, this will be like a back and forth process. And so the tentative title, though, for this next book is Follow Through. So it's essentially about the science of goal attainment, where, I've been pouring through all the research because we all have these goals and by the way, it's nice to be talking and not have something to promote because this book will come out in like a year, maybe more than a year from now. So
Sure.
it'll be long forgotten in the minds of people by the time it comes out, which is fine. At least the people listening right now. So yeah, follow through the science of finishing what you start. We all have these goals that are kind of, the equivalent of those pieces of exercise equipment that collect dust in the basement, these forgotten goals. And I got curious, why do we drop certain goals while we follow through with other ones? What are the ingredients that actually lead us to action, lead us to goal attainment, lead us to accomplishment? It's not all about accomplishment, right? That's not everybody wants to be accomplishing things all the time, but we want to basically be accomplishing the things that we set out to do in the first place, the intentions that we set. So there's a lot of kind of topics to weave that I do all on my Mac and to the iPad to a certain extent, with intentionality, with goal attainment, with the science of human values, which there actually is science behind human values. It sounds like a mushy topic, but it isn't. But yeah, it's exciting to be here and maybe not, and not have anything to promote really. What a refreshing thing.
Well, Chris, what I love about your work in productivity space is you just don't spout off. You really do the research. And I know you spend a lot of time reading, the science on these things and finding the science, which I don't think is always that easy. And it's interesting reading your books because it always kind of lines up with the science. And I think I can't wait to see what you do with this. To me, intentionality is like such a difficult burden. My goal, if I had a goal every year, I think it is just to be more intentional with my life. If I could just hold on to that, I feel like I could be so much better at everything. And it just slips through your fingers so easy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, intention is great, but the old saying is the road to hell is paved with the good intentions that we say.
There you go. Yeah.
And so there definitely is that disconnect. And that's, by the way, what I see productivity as, personal productivity, maybe not to our fellow nerds listening and joining us right now, but if you ask a random person on the street, what does productivity mean to you? If they don't walk by and just shake their head at you for asking such a question, they'll probably think of something that feels like cold and corporate and all about efficiency and effectiveness and boiling our lives down to a spreadsheet. But it really does come back to that for me. It's really just about that core of intentionality. But the more intentional we become, the more deliberate we become, the more productive we become. And this is kind of the approach that I've taken throughout. This was kind of one of the main lessons from that original productivity project that you mentioned. But then you think, okay, how do we apply this idea of intentionality to how we can focus more deeply? Which led to a second book that I wrote. How do we apply this idea of intentionality? We have a world that likes to agitate our mind. How do we calm our mind so that we can actually focus, so that the noise in our mind doesn't obscure how we see the world, how we focus on the world, so that the world around us doesn't compromise on the mental resources that we have to focus as well. And this is really that idea of following through. How do we become more intentional about the things that we really want to accomplish? So it's really zeroing in on that idea of intentionality, but it's been there all along, right? You said it every year. I feel a lot of people only set intentions at the start of yoga classes or something. Like it's really something we need to do more often. The more intentional we become, the more productive we become. And so it really does come back to that deliberateness.
Yeah, I mean, to go a level deeper on this, it's not just productive that you become with intention, but it becomes productive on the right things. And that's why intentionality is my white whale. So I can't wait to read the book, and I'm looking forward to this. In a year.
Like this one.
That's the thing I learned from you, is that like you read a book and it goes away for like a year. What does it do for a year? Does it go to like the book written Do they have like a book vacation? Do the words go to like Hawaii? What happens for a year? Because you're almost done writing this, right?
Where do butterflies go when it rains, David? I don't know. Nobody really knows. It's more of like a book purgatory.
You just know you turn it in, and then like a year later it comes out.
Yeah, it goes through this massive Rube Goldberg machine that is the publishing industry.
Yeah.
But the truth is, like, I'll hand in. So my manuscript, if people are interested in this inside baseball stuff, my manuscript is due at the end of November. So I'll hand it in then. And then it'll go through that said contraption. So it'll go to the main editor that I have at Penguin Random House, Nina. She probably isn't listening, but if my old editor Rick was a big Mac nerd, ironically, I remember pitching the first book that I did with him, which was called Hyperfocus, and I mentioned offhandedly that I had a text expander snippet for Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote that book Flow.
Yeah.
And I think he was more impressed by the text expander snippet than anything else that I had done with that book, and so we've become good friends. Hi, Rick. There is an above zero chance that Rick is listening, but essentially it goes to Nina. She edits it for taste, and so she'll say, "Oh, this section is great. Keep this. Expand on this. But this section is absolute garbage. Why did you include that in the book? Nobody wants to hear." And so she'll be the taste editor, the stand-in for the reader, where I can't be, because that's what I try to do. I try to disseminate all or boil down all the research to the tactical bits that people might actually find helpful and interesting. And she edits it, then it goes through copy editing, then there's the internal book design, which I'm really hoping to get a specific font from a specific app, which we can talk about, as the main font of the book. And then it goes to kind of translation. So that's another part of the process where certain books get translated, where other publishers did. So it makes sense why it takes so long, but if you're looking at it from the outside in, you think, man, isn't the book done at this point? But it's really not a book yet. It's just a document in there.
It's a collection of ones and zeros.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
A couple feedback things on that. Okay, first of all, now that you're making video courses, you're going to get to learn the loveliness of finishing it and pushing the publish button and being done.
Yes.
It's just done. It's out there.
I'm almost there. And having no editor, right taste editor.
Yeah. You have to be careful though with that. Like because when I wrote 2 books for a proper publishing company. I did 2 books for Wiley Press, one called Mac at Work and one called iPad at Work. And I had an editor for those books, and he was really good at telling me how my voice was too personal, and you gotta like take the highs and lows out of this. This is not the kind of book that Barnes and Noble is interested in. So I did that, and then I started writing field guides, and they started out as books. And I remember thinking, okay, I don't have an editor now. I get to do whatever I want. But that was the case with George Lucas and the prequels as well. So I have to be careful. Yeah. And but yeah, so you'll get that. The other thing I have to ask you, just while we're on the topic, when people give you feedback on your book, what do you respond to? Are you one of those people that like you need them to say, this is terrible, you got to redo it? Or do you like kind of positive, soft feedback? What works for you?
Oh man. Well, I have a very fragile ego and I'm very insecure. So the more positive, no, I'm just kidding. I like hearing how people are actually doing this stuff in their everyday life. And that's ultimately my goal with any one of these books. It's not so somebody can say, oh, I think I agree with chapter and this and that. I want people to actually, but I thought this part of the book was weak. That's fine, but the book is already out. Like there's not much I can do about it. I'm most curious about that ground level, right? This is ultimately why I love doing this stuff, is to give people the tools that they need to just get more done every day, become more intentional every day,
Yeah.
become calmer, happier, focused, more productive, whatever they want to do. I want to help them get there and do work on their behalf and be this person who can fill this role for them, because nobody wants to read all these academic pieces of literature that have been published on topics, but I actually do, and I don't mind doing that on behalf of the reader. But I love hearing about how things are actioned on a day-to-day basis, and the situations where these different strategies work and where they are relevant, and the situations where they're not relevant. Because I think that's kind of the art of productivity advice in a way, because there's a lot of different strategies out there for becoming more productive. If you, I haven't done this in a while, but if you Google productivity advice, you'll be overwhelmed by the number of articles, by the number of podcasts, by the number of books. I'm not helping matters by creating more content of my own, but on another level, I hope I am, by filtering through kind of what's out there. And kind of the art of it is knowing what pieces of advice to take and which to leave on the table. And I think it ultimately comes down to experimentation, right? You won't know until you try. There will be some pieces of advice where you might think, okay, it'll never work in my life to wake up at 4 a.m. every morning, go to sleep at 8. It's just not realistic with the life I live. There's that kind of advice. But then the rest of it, you kind of have to experiment with to see what sticks for your own situation. So what sticks for me might not stick for you, might stick great for somebody else, might not stick for some. So it's really that process of filtering and finding what works. So with advice or with kind of feedback, I don't want to say that I've heard it all at this point, but the novelty has decreased a little bit with regard to the feedback now that I'm 4 books in, plus an Audible thing that a bunch of people listen to called How to Train Your Mind. I don't mind plugging it because it's free if you have an Audible account, I believe. And so I'm curious, like, where the rubber meets the road, what's working, what's not, what didn't I think about, stuff like that.
Yeah, I recently saw an old lawyer friend who was making fun of me. I think he thought, I'm not sure if it was well intended or not, but he's like, yeah, you used to have a successful law practice and now you just sit around and tell people, how to use their Macs, And it's like, I think he kind of meant it to insult me. I'm not really sure. Yeah. I mean, lawyers are weird, but
aren't they?
I got thinking, oh, you're right. And I am so happy with that equation because I feel like I'm doing more good for the world in this role than I was in the other one. So yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Somebody else can kind of fill in the role that you used to have. But in terms of becoming more intentional with technology, I personally think, just to butter you up a little bit, I personally think you fill a good role. Like the productivity field guide comes to mind for me. I don't know if if people listening have dug into this, but if you pick up one field guide and you haven't, pick up the productivity field guide, because it really is that kind of bridge with technology to that intentional use of it.
Well, thanks, Chris.
There you go. I'll plug your stuff.
Yeah, I'll get and the check's in the mail. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. You can just pay for our next trip to Disney.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, I'll do that. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by NetSuite. Go to netsuite.com/MPU for the leading integrated cloud business software suite. What does the future hold for business? Ask 9 experts and you'll get 10 answers. Some will say rates will rise or fall. Others might say inflation is up or down. The only way business owners can know for sure is if someone invents a crystal ball. And until then, over 40,000 businesses have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR, all into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. When you're closing the books in days, not weeks, You're spending less time looking backwards and more time on what's next. When it comes to running your business, information is power, and having a single source of truth is essential. NetSuite gives you that. It gives you those forecasts and actionable data for your business. I was a business lawyer for a long time, and I can tell you the businesses that succeed are the ones that have that power. Whether your company is earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities. Speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/MPU. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/MPU. netsuite.com/MPU is that link one last time. Go get that AI and machine learning guide. It will help you out. And our thanks to NetSuite for their support of the Mac Power users and all of Relay. Well, we usually talk about our Apple gear in the first segment, but Steven's not here. What's the saying? The cat's away, the mice will play, something like that.
Cat's out of the bag?
Yeah, we had a lot of fun the first segment. We didn't talk about what gear you're using. Since you've last been on this show, Apple has gone all in with Apple Silicon and kind of transformed the Mac.
Yeah.
Chris, I don't even know what kind of Mac are you using these days?
I remember complaining about my keyboard on the last episode.
Oh, yeah. That was the thing on our show for a long time.
Yes, where everybody just came on and complained about. Now, I have what I consider to be my, I have computers that I love from the past.
Yeah.
That I have this kind of nostalgic glow, right? Where I look back and I think, oh, that iBook G4 is the first Mac laptop that I had, and I think, oh, what a beautiful piece of technology. They don't make that like that anymore. And then I think, yeah, they don't. It's better. Like the battery life on this. So I'm using a laptop that I hope to drive into the ground. The MacBook Pro M1 Pro. I got I think it was the top of the line one because I thought, okay, I'm going all in on this thing. I hope to have it. I don't know if I'll have it. 10 years might be a bit of a stretch, but so far it's been these things came out in 2021, is it?
Yeah, 2021. So you're 3 years in with it.
Yeah, sir. So it's still going strong though. I need a battery replacement, I think, some point soon, but it's 3 years in, it's normal.
That is a good thing. Battery replacements are not that expensive.
No.
And I hear from listeners all the time, we're like, well, the battery's dead. I think I'm just going to get a new one. And you really don't have to get a new one. Apple has a great battery replacement program for almost everything they sell. And it's worth checking that out. Like, how much would it cost? Sometimes it's like in the $100 range. They've got the gear there. They can do it for you. And if you've got working Apple tech and the battery's dying, that is not a reason to replace it. You can save a ton of money just replacing the battery.
Oh, 100%. Like, I think that will probably double the life of this thing.
Yeah.
No exaggeration. I still have 32 gigs of RAM. It'll be there till it's soldered in. 32 gigs of RAM in the thing, which is way more than I need or use. So, but I got this laptop. So this is my laptop and desktop. I wanted to. So I have a new desk here installed in my office because we bought a home here in the lovely city of Ottawa, Canada. And so my goal with the setup was I just wanted one cable, so I could plug that in and unplug it whenever I wanted to sit down and use it in kind of what I think of as cockpit mode, where I've got the studio display, I've got the keyboard and mouse, I've got all my mics hooked up and lighting and cameras, everything like that. So
sure.
One cable for all that. So I've got the CalDigit TS4 dock to accomplish that. I love this thing. I don't know if this is still kind of the one that's recommended out there because I bought it a couple of years ago. Maybe there is a new one that came along and is taking its place. I did a quick little search before we hopped on the horn, and it seems to be pretty high on recommendation lists, but it's got everything I need. It's got a ton of power, power in terms of electricity power to charge things, to charge the laptop when I'm using it. It's got a huge, I'm pulling back here a bit on the desk. It's got this huge kind of power adapter, which I pulled it out of the box and I thought, oh, thank God this thing is huge, because the actual device itself is a bit small. I was worried about the wattage a little bit for charging a lot of things at once. But it has, I think, 2 or 3 Thunderbolt connectors on it. So the studio display goes right into that thing. My iPad Pro is hooked up to it as well through another Thunderbolt cable, which I don't really take advantage of. It's mostly a charging cable, honestly. But I love that thing. It's the perfect kind of cockpit setup. And then grab and go. Your laptop's always charged. There is a part of me that is a bit tempted by that desktop life, to have a Mac Mini here so I can leave this laptop somewhere else. But I like just having one computer. It's simple. It's kind of clean.
It's so much easier because, in a lot of ways, because all your data is always with you. All your plugins are always plugged in. All that stuff just works. I do have 2 Macs, and occasionally I do run into a problem. Like, I'm on the laptop, I'm like, I don't have the thing that does the thing on this thing, and that's frustrating. But that is a long dispute between Mac users. Do you get a desktop and a laptop, or do you just get a really souped up laptop? Steven's right now on the laptop side of that. Which size did you get? Is the 14 or the 16?
I went 14.
Okay.
Yeah, because I travel too much to have a big aircraft carrier laptop.
And that makes sense because you got a big screen. Do you use it in clamshell when you're on your desk?
Yeah, okay. I do. I've tried setups where I do have the laptop as a second display, but with the studio display, I don't know if I called it a cinema display, right? But it's a studio display.
Yeah.
With that, I can't really stand the difference in the refresh rate.
Yeah. And they never look quite the same having an open laptop.
No.
And I do know, Chris, that you travel. I mean, you were recently in Poland, and when you're a fancy author, you go and you do speaking stuff all over the world, and I would imagine that a 16-inch could be a pain for you on those long flights.
Yeah, and there is the occasional long flight where I do long for a 16-inch laptop, or when I'm at a hotel room and I forgot my speaker or something. I've got the little Sonos Roam, which I also love for travel.
Yeah.
If you don't have a good travel speaker, I highly, highly recommend one. If you do a lot of traveling for just podcasts, maybe people are listening to this podcast on their travel speaker. If that's the case, hello.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Just but our house is filled with music all the time. There's always something playing here. But there are the times that I long for the bigger laptop where I'm on a long flight and I'm watching a movie or something, or I want 3 windows open instead of 2, which I feel 2 windows is kind of the comfortable sweet spot for me. One on the left, one on the right, where I do want a bit more space, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's the classic trade-off, right? It's size versus portability, and I think there's a reason that at the end of the day this one sells more.
Okay.
Than the 16, yeah.
If the Tim Cook fairy showed up right now, let's imagine Tim with a wand and wings. He says, Chris, I'm going to let you, one time only, I'm going to let you swap this to an M1 16-inch. If you say yes, I'll wave my wand and you'll have it. 3 years in, would you do that?
Well, it's Tim Cook, so he probably would want to charge me something. But
no, this is the Tim Cook
not.
fairy. He's not going to charge you anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd say Thank you, Tim Cook Ferry. But no, I'm good.
Okay.
And you know what? You know what, David? You know what? I don't even want a new one. I want to drive this computer into the ground. I want to be struggling to do things on it by the time I have to reluctantly say that this
Farewell.
laptop
Yeah.
is done.
I think what saves you is the 32 gigabytes of RAM, because with Apple Intelligence, RAM is going to become an issue. And for the folks that got the M1 with the 8 gigabytes of RAM, those are going to have a harder time in a few years. But a MacBook Pro with 32 gigabytes of RAM, M1, I think you might be able to get 10 years out of this if you're willing to suffer a bit. And then I guess the other question is, when will they stop supporting it? But I have to stop beating this drum. I had a listener write me and say, stop saying this. But I just think these Apple Silicon Macs are going to run forever. There's just not that much to break on them. So you may get your wish.
I hope so.
You mentioned an iPad. Do you do a lot of iPadding?
Oh,
is that a verb? I don't know.
Oh, let's make fetch happen. Let's make iPadding happen.
All right.
Or not. I don't know. No, I don't. And so the iPad, and my wife makes fun of me constantly because I am constantly buying a new iPad and then selling that iPad 6 months later. I got this iPad Pro, it's the previous generation, as if that matters with kind of what these things are capable of. I guess the new one's a bit lighter, which would be nice, but this one's fine. It's kind of like, I've always wanted to be the person that reads comic books. I've always wanted to be that kind of comic book nerd kind of guy, where it's like, okay, I just, I have that aspiration to be that kind of person. And whenever I see a new iPad and I don't have one, and I see all these things that you can do with, what does a computer look like? It looks like an iPad. And so you can buy this iPad and you can write with it on the go. And I got the cellular one, so I could go to the coffee shop. If there's bad Wi-Fi, no Wi-Fi, doesn't matter. You can still use the iPad. I got like a lot of storage. It's just the top of the line iPad Pro, the big one too, so I could use it as a computer replacement. But it's kind of the comic book thing all over again. I'd love to be somebody that reads comic books. I've tried, but they're just not for me. I can't connect with them. If somebody out there actually has a good comic book recommendation, I wouldn't mind. Chris at chrisbailey.com. And also, if you're emailing anything you want to see in that course that we were kind of mentioning, that'll be out in a while from now. Down to hear feedback about that too, what you want to get out of it. But I'm just not an iPad guy. I've tried using this thing every which way. I'd love to be an iPad guy. I'm just not. And I think I'm coming to terms with that slowly. I await anxiously the touchscreen Mac that maybe goes against what I was just saying. That might be the Mac that replaces this one if there is kind of a foldable touchscreen Mac at some point. But this iPad, it just doesn't fit with the workflows that I have. I do read the occasional study on it, but whenever I'm doing that, I think I don't want to be looking at a screen right now. I want to have a piece of paper in my hand that I can highlight with an actual highlighter, an actual pen. That doesn't, like, I think a bit of clunkiness in that workflow is okay for me, because to get things into the digital realm from the analog, I have to process them again to get them into that place. And so I don't know. I feel I keep repeating this point, but I'd love to be an iPad guy, but I just can't fit it into the workflows that I have.
Yeah, sometimes a little friction helps. It's not always bad.
Little friction in the right places.
Yeah. You told me at one point you were doing an experiment, and I never heard what you concluded, but you had decided to carry an iPad mini with a cellular connection and no iPhone.
Yes. I never did write an article about that, because I think right after the experiment, I launched right into book writing mode. I'm actually excited to have time to write articles and stuff again after this book comes out.
So tell us what you did and how it turned out.
Yeah, so for I think it was a month, I essentially got rid of my iPhone and replaced it with iPad mini phone, is what I was affectionately referring to it as. And so instead of carrying around my phone, I had my iPad mini phone in my backpack. And that was actually a nice part of it, where if I wanted to access the digital world, I had to grab my backpack from my back and swing it around and pull this iPad out. And it was kind of hand holdable on some level, where you can just, flip the case open and scroll through a bunch of things as you're walking around. It was great for reading. So it was great for a lot of things. But ultimately, what it came down to for me were the jobs that I hired these different devices to do for me. And I think this is actually something I think a lot when I welcome a new device into my life, where I think, what are the jobs that I'm hiring this thing to do for me? And the phone fills a lot of these jobs for us, right? It's a boarding pass, it's a pocket watch, it's a GPS navigator, it's a are you getting it? It's all these things. It's the iPhone. And so over time, this phone, which has essentially become most people's main personal computers, and probably nobody that listens to this show, but if you look at the general population, this device is people's main personal computer. And so it's slurping up all these different jobs, and all of those jobs are designed for the form factor of the phone. And, in our case, in our ecosystem, for the iPhone, boarding passes are the size and shape of an iPhone, the digital ones. The pocket watch that we have on this, it's very easy to see. You can see it when your phone screen is off, even when it's in standby mode. And so what I found was that, if you're a big enough tech nerd, you can make any device work for anything. I remember another experiment to use my phone for an hour a day for a month. And I managed to shift over a lot of those jobs to be done from the phone to the Mac at the time. And in a lot of different productive ways, my productivity went up by quite a bit, though it's a bit unrealistic to use the phone in that way. And I found the same with iPad mini phone, that the jobs to be done could shift over to that device, but they were designed for the iPhone in the first place. And so it was pretty inelegant in a way. Everything was a bit clunkier. The refresh rate really bugged me, much like the dual display setup, why that didn't stick. And so ultimately I went back to the iPhone.
And which iPhone are you using these days?
Oh, yes, it's the iPhone 14 Pro. Okay. I've got the purple one. And I don't have a reason to upgrade yet. I haven't found one.
Yeah, a big one or a little one?
Little.
Okay.
Just a little guy.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by 1Password. Go to 1password.com/MPU right now and get 20% off your plan. 1Password is your all-in-one security solution for security on the internet. It creates passwords, but it also can create usernames. 1Password is a suite of tools covering your security and privacy. And best of all, they have solutions for any user, whether you're an individual, a family, a team, a business, a small business, or even an enterprise. One of my favorite features of 1Password is what they call 1Password Watchtower. Watchtower checks for security problems with the websites you use so you can keep all your accounts safe. It's built right into 1Password. So if the company you're dealing with has a security breach, 1Password lets you know. We don't have time to keep up with all this stuff yourself. The Watchtower dashboard serves as your security HQ, automatically summarizing any breaches or other vulnerabilities. You'll also see Watchtower alerts on individual items if there's an issue that you need to address. They even check your passwords against known disclosures of publicly available passwords. The bad guys sometimes publish passwords on the web to share with each other. Now, if one of your passwords shows up there, 1Password will let you know. That's all part of Watchtower. It's a great system that really keeps you protected. But that's just one of many features. You have secure notes where you can keep information behind the 1Password vault. You have easy sharing. If you've got a family, you can share between your family or with your company, with your coworkers. They've got secure cloud storage. They've really thought through every possible need for someone that wants to take care of themselves and protect themselves, their family, and their company on the internet. Don't take my word, though. Over 150,000 companies use 1Password. And if you head over to onepassword.com/MPU, you can get 20% off your plan. That URL one more time is onepassword.com/MPU. Go check it out and start protecting yourself today. All right, Chris, we're going to talk about some of your writing workflows on the new book. But before we get to that, I was just curious, what is your tech stack? What are the apps you use daily to get through life with your business is speaking and writing and all the different things you do? What's your calendar and notes and stuff like that? How do you handle it?
Yeah, well, calendar is fantastical. And I will resist the urge to complain about the subscription price. But it really is the best calendar app. The keyboard shortcuts, how data is presented, how data scales down to the different devices that you use. Have I ever mentioned for notes, David? Have I ever mentioned Simple Note to you? It's called
Simple Note. I don't think you've ever talked to me about Simple Note.
No,
we're laughing because Chris always talks about Simple Note.
Yes. I am obsessed with this application. So it is just, it's a plain text collection of notes. The word is simple. It's a simple note-taking app. There's very few features, but syncing on this is incredible. I have never had, now I will, but I've never had a syncing issue with this app. I use it on the Mac. I use it, just on every device that I own. And this is actually how I manage. And this is the thing when you do a lot of interviews about productivity, people ask what app do you use for managing what you have to get done every day? And in my head, I kind of think, okay, now I have to explain my weird system for managing what I have to get done. But I use Simple Note. I manage my day in plain text. And so when I wake up, I do my morning routines, and then I open Simple Note and I press caps lock 0. And so caps lock, you're probably familiar with the hyperkey idea from I think it was Brett Terpstra that
Brett made it big. I think it might have existed before then, but the idea is you remap the caps lock key to be Shift Control Option Command. So it's like a super modifier key.
Yeah. And no app really uses those modifiers.
Exactly.
Because there's so many of them. It's such a weird contortion of the fingers. And so the idea is you map those to the cap lock key, and then you get this whole universe of keyboard shortcuts available to you, because you can press caps lock and just anything. So like if I press caps lock P, Keyboard Maestro window pops up, and this is something that I use quite often for my different workflows, where this opens a packing list generator that I programmed. And so a little window will pop up and it'll ask, how many days do you want to be away? I'll say 6 here. What type of work are you doing? Or what type of travel are you doing? Is it for work or personal? Are you doing domestic or international? And what city are you going to? And so what this will do is it'll pop open a text edit window. It'll populate it with everything that I need that is calibrated for how many days I'll be away, for where, if I'm going domestically or internationally, it'll populate appropriately for that. It'll name the file after the city that I'll be going to. It'll save the file, and so this is like stream. So I have one of these shortcuts for my daily schedule, where I'll press caps lock 0, and it'll essentially generate a template based on what day of the week it is for what I have to do that day. So, there's a certain day of the week that I water the plants in the house, and it'll put that in the template. There's certain days of the week that I review my waiting for list. We all have a to-do list. We should also all keep a waiting for list so nothing slips through the cracks. What we're waiting for people on, what we're waiting for with packages, all this stuff. If it's a certain season, certain things will pop up, like that I should be, like that I need to make sure to use my happy light, which is the sun therapy, because I live in Canada. A little meditation reminder, a vitamin D reminder, depending on the season. So this I find to be invaluable, because I can customize in plain text what I could not get from an app that isn't something custom. I did use Things as an app for managing what I had to get done. If I had to use an app, that would be the app that I would use. But plain text, where it syncs gracefully, where I can just kind of use whatever format I want for things, where I can capture things below it, where I can categorize things however I want by context, work, home,
Sure.
admin versus important, all these different things. I love Simple Note and plain text for that. So yeah, Fantastical, Simple Note, and I don't know what else is interesting with workflows.
Well, before we get into that, I want to go back a little bit on your text generation for packing and for your daily list. So that's a Keyboard Maestro script that you're running?
Yes, sir.
So then it's, I would assume, just grabbing what day of the week it is, and it's got an if statement. Or tell us a little bit about what's under the hood in Keyboard Maestro to make that happen.
Yeah, let me hop into it here. So the hotkey is the one that I mentioned, the caps lock P. I never know what the little upward pointing arrow is. Is that Control?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Control, Option, Shift, Command P, and then it executes the action. And by the way, and I feel like I keep plugging your stuff, but I genuinely love the stuff you create, David. You have a great Keyboard Maestro field guide for this as well. By the way, I should say David did not ask me to plug anything in case that's
I'm blushing now. I'm
having their head.
Blushing.
Okay. Oh, good. Always a good day when you blush. So then it generates a prompt, and so it asks for there's a prompt text, there's the different variables. The buttons are create and cancel, then activate text edit, select new in the menu file in text edit. So
yeah.
So then that goes down, and so then it's a bunch of conditional variables. And so if certain conditions are met, insert a certain amount of text. And so if the type of, for example, if the type of traveling that I'm doing, if the type field equals work, then it'll paste the items that I would need for a work trip that are related to speaking. And so maybe this is boring, but confirmation of travel arrangements, the clickers that I travel with, some C to A adapters for said clickers, a USB key with a talk on it, and the contract for the talk if I'm traveling internationally. So essentially it pastes a bunch of text based on those conditional variables. It pauses for 2 seconds because it sometimes needs a little second to catch its breath.
Yeah.
Then it selects file, save. It pauses for 0.5 seconds, which is essential for the thing to animate. And then it pastes the text that is the city, and then the words pack list, simulates the keystroke return, and then got the file. I just delete what I don't need to pack, and the pack list is done like that. Can you tell I travel a lot? This actually saves me time.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. And that's really, it's not that difficult to put up this type of automation. And Keyboard Maestro is an excellent tool for it if you're going to do it just on the Mac. Shortcuts could also do this if you wanted to do it on both platforms, but it doesn't really matter. these days we have great options, and whichever one. Like I know that you bonded with Keyboard Maestro, so you build these
Yeah.
things there. I love that you added math in it to figure out like how many socks to bring. Um, because like my packing list, it just says socks, and I just I'm like, well, I think about it when I'm packing. I'm like, well, 4 days. I guess I need 4 pair of socks. But yours does it for you. I love that.
Yeah.
You took that extra step.
Well, you just all you do is you take the number of days you'll be away and put that before socks.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, like, for a while, and this is if anybody's coding this, this will be relevant for you. For a while, I was adding one to all these numbers, but you just have to add one to the number of days that you'll be away, and you can compensate for that. But you actually don't need an extra pair of socks, underwear, whatever, because what you don't count is what you're wearing on the
Yeah.
day that you're actually doing the traveling to the place that you're going to. And so the math does work out.
Unless you don't show up for the airplane with your socks on, then you got a problem.
Yeah. Or you like a midday sock change.
I'm not going to argue with that. Sometimes it makes sense.
Do you have a sock sponsor today?
No, I don't, sadly.
Well,
But
one pair ought to do then.
But sometimes I do need a new pair of socks. Like when it rains in Southern California, because none of us own waterproof shoes. Like we think we do, but we don't. And then when it rains, we discover that. I learned about rainproof jackets when I went to Scotland. I thought I had a rainproof jacket, and one afternoon in Scotland, it proved that it was thoroughly not rainproof. I feel the same about socks and shoes.
Huh. This is very informative, David.
So then, Chris, you get this task list, this plain text, and Simple Note. By the way, I'm sure a lot of folks will remember it because it was the hotness in the early days of the iPhone. Everybody used Simple Note because it was the first app that really did a good job of syncing plain text. And then then there was a million new apps that came on. But I love that you're still using Simple Note. That makes me think there's hope for you in your 10-year MacBook. Honestly,
yeah. I want to be the John Siracusa of this MacBook Pro.
Okay,
just drive it into the
full Siracusa, 10 years.
Yeah,
there we go.
Go full Siracusa on it.
Email. Do you you must get so much email. How do you deal with it?
Oh, email. The answer is honestly as little as I possibly can, because when you're in, and we were talking about this, I think before we hit record, when you're in this kind of work that you do, that I do, we're the CEO of what we do, but we're also the chief broom pusher of what we do. We have kind of every. I mean, I have a couple of people that help me out with different tasks like administrative stuff and stuff like that. But email, if you're the CEO of whatever, it is still very, very difficult to tame. I think I heard Merlin Mann at one point describe taming email as kind of like trying to solve email is like trying to solve rain. You can't really stop rain from falling, but the best you can do is try to contain it and channel it after it does. So that's what I try to do. I try to channel it in kind of the rain gutters of my workflows, if that makes sense. So the first thing I do are sprints. Checking email all day long is just a recipe for, in my view, distraction, misery, just being responsive to what happens to come our way.
And it's the enemy of that intentionality we were talking about at the beginning.
It really is, because whatever comes in, that's what you focus on. When there's a new email, your attention goes to that. And then that kind of guides you through what you do next, instead of actually intentionally determining what you will do instead of being told what you'll do. If you are sitting at a desk and every, 3 to 5 minutes, somebody just dropped a new stack on it and asked you for your attention, for you to look at that thing, at some point you would probably get fed up and leave that workplace, or you would say, just no, put it in this box over here. Let's call it an inbox, and so I can deal with it later, and just at more convenient time and let a bunch of things stack up so I can do it all at once. This is what I do. I do email sprints. I don't do constant email checks. So maybe 2 or 3 times a day, I'll set a timer for 20 minutes or so. That's usually how long the sprints are. And in that time, I'll blow through as many messages as I possibly humanly can. I just use Apple Mail, and I disable the accounts when I'm not doing a sprint. And so all throughout the day, my wife and I, we have a joint email address that we use for personal things, which I also highly recommend. Sometimes something will come in. It's a slow trickle in that. But for some reason, whatever this does in my mind, because I have a high impulsivity and low self-control, this tells my brain on some level that I'm doing email still. I'm still responding to what comes in. And so that part of what I have to do that day is checked. But then a sprint will come along. I'll enable the accounts. I use Fastmail on the back end, which if you run your own or if you roll your own email, I highly recommend. And just enable them, blow through as many messages as I can in the sprint. At the end of the sprint, I'll be left with a few that are probably less important. And I don't know if I want to admit this publicly, but I'll often just archive what's left because I have a book to write.
Yeah.
I have a course to create. I have travel to do. I have speaking things to prepare for. And so marginally past that 20-minute point, it's still an hour a day on email if there's 3 sprints. That ought to be enough. And past that point, I'm really taking time away from other things. If something requires a longer reply, I'll copy and paste the original message in a new text edit file, and I'll keep kind of a running series of drafts on my desktop that I'll delete at the end of the day or at the end of the week, depending on how long these things take to think through. Because I feel some email responses actually deserve more thought beyond that just responsive reply. And so for that, I'll kind of channel those off differently. But what's left after that point, it's usually like that's kind of the point of diminishing marginal returns for me. And, there's this whole thing in economics of diminishing marginal utility where past a certain point, it's not worth, doing that thing again. And I find the same with email. There's that point of diminishing returns after about an hour a day for me. And so there is a lot of rain that falls, but there's also a lot of gutters in place to get things to the right places.
All right, I want to follow up on a couple of those points. The first one is disabling the email account. So you just go into the settings and you turn it off.
Oh yeah, it's muscle memory for me. So I just open Mail, I press accounts, I select the account and uncheck enable this account. It takes like 10 seconds. Easy.
Yeah, I bet you could probably automate that with Keyboard Maestro.
Probably, yeah. Maybe that's a friction point I want.
Yeah, I get it. But it's an interesting step, though, to say, well, I'm not even capable of receiving email right now.
Yeah.
And
I'm not here.
That's kind of nice. It might like there's a bit of probably cognitive load offloaded at that point, right? It's like, an email isn't even a thing in my life right now.
And I will say on that point of cognitive load, there is a bit of new load that comes because you're thinking, oh, I'm not online right now. I'm not accessible. But then you kind of think it through. And so you have an 8-hour day, you have 3 sprints. People have to wait like 2 or 3 hours tops for you to reply to something. That's reasonable. But we shouldn't ask for more from ourselves or from other people than that.
Yeah. I'll tell you a challenge I have is that it's kind of my inability to make it a daily practice. When I get into something, like right now I'm finishing a new field guide and it's a tremendous amount of work. And so I'm doing that and I'll go 2 or 3 days without checking email. And that is like the worst, right? You're not supposed to do that. That's bad email. I'm a bad email
Do you not
person.
have guilt when you don't check?
Certainly not enough. So much so that I'm really thinking about, because JF helps me out with the background stuff. I'm really thinking about just like pointing my email at him so he can like see stuff. Like if something comes in and like then things come in, they're like, oh, I look like a flake. I should have responded to this 2 days ago. But I get into the zone and I just don't do it, you know. So that's a weird problem. The other thing I would say is I want to double the recommendation for Fastmail. I also signed up for Fastmail 2 or 3 years ago, and as soon as I did, I wish I had done it much earlier. It's so good, and you can go into their website and you can add a lot of automation filtering right at the source with Fastmail. Like if like, you know, I have a folder called vendors. You can just say, well, automatically send anything from this person to the vendors folder or whatever. So you can do a lot of really good automation. I don't know. Have you played with that at all?
Not really. No. I don't want to spend like more time on email than I have to.
Yeah.
And maybe I do recognize that with automation, you know, there is return that you get. That there is like you don't reach that point of diminishing returns at the very beginning.
Yeah.
You know, there are these low hanging fruit automations that you can set up. My biggest automation, though, and this comes from, you know, a point of running this business, is I have an autoresponder for my public email address where it says I check email, you know, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and if you need something quicker, you can email these people depending on what you need. And it's like that's like a freedom generator because you can just turn that on. You can not worry about set it and forget it, as they say. But I do love Fastmail. I will say, like, it's kind of like Simple Note, where, you know, the differentiator is in the name. It really is fast. You go to the website, it's fast. You get it's fast, it's simple, and it's very, very secure and private, which I love as well.
You've inspired me. I'm going to make some MaxSparky Labs videos on automating Fastmail because it is
good.
The turnaround on the you know, where you get the time invested versus the time saved, that happens very fast. Because also setting automations in Fastmail is fast.
So I have a question for you with automations. So, you know, there's the thing with productivity advice where not all of it is created equal. You have to experiment with what works to find what actually allows you to make back time. But you make back so much time that it's worthwhile to find those things. I feel automation is kind of similar to that in that there's this low-hanging fruit that's available to people where you get so much time back if you do X, Y, or Z, but don't bother spending all your time on this stuff.
Yeah.
Do you think that's true? And B, how do you actually identify that stuff?
Well, I mean, for me, the math is different because, first of all, I like to teach people about the easy stuff like text expansion and simple shortcuts. Like you can generate those on your own. You'll get the time back very quickly. For the more complex stuff, one of my goals as MaxSparky is just to give it to you. You know, I'll go down the rabbit hole. So even though I'll never get the time back that I spent making a complex automation, if I save it and share it with 50,000 people and, you know, some of them use it, I think in the universe, it balances out. And I kind of have a different math on it because of what I do. But I think if I was just not, you know, making podcasts and screencasts about all this stuff, then I would have to make kind of what I call the hobby calculation. For some people, it's just like doing a jigsaw puzzle, like figuring out this little problem is kind of fun. And that's great, but you have to schedule for it, just like you would for doing fun things like making a jigsaw puzzle, right? You don't stop what you're doing when you're in production to say, okay, I'm going to spend the next 4 hours automating this thing. But maybe over the weekend, you know, rather than, you know, playing in a wood shop or watching a movie, you sit down and figure out automation because that's fun to you, then it's okay.
You know what other area I find this similar? I don't know if what you want, like a dichotomy of usefulness in, is home automation.
Yeah.
So in the past, I've spent hours, more time than I want to admit, automating one thing that saves me like 0.5 seconds once or twice a week.
Yeah.
Whereas there are other times where you program something that saves you, like motion lighting is kind of low hanging fruit, I think, for a lot of home automation stuff. It doesn't work for every situation, but stairwell lighting it works incredibly well for.
Yeah.
We have kind of a closet area that we have motion lighting for, which also works remarkably well for. But stuff like that is kind of the low hanging fruit. But then you have the stuff where it's like, okay, on my weather station, when the pressure goes from this, you can go into the weeds pretty quickly. It's kind of, I feel you can kind of feel out like what will actually save you time and what will add not only convenience but kind of this daily delight as you use your home. Maybe automation is similar to that. I don't know.
Yeah. And everybody has a different tipping point. I mean, there's
Yeah.
certainly a case for more advanced automation that you'll never get the time back. But if you enjoy it, if it gives you delight when it triggers, go for it. Something on home automation, Chris, I have to tell you, is there's a new technology called the human presence sensor. And that is the answer. Because so many people have been using these infrared sensors, but they're just not that great. Like if you have an infrared sensor and you stay still in the room, it forgets you're there. Human presence sensors. I don't even know what dark science is involved with this little box, but I put one in my studio, and now reliably, when I walk in, the lights turn on. When I walk out, the lights turn off, and they don't go out while I'm in here. And it's like suddenly the biggest question people have about home automation: can I just make a thing that turns the lights on when I come in and goes out, turns them off when I go out? That's now a thing. And it's using these human presence sensors. Aqara makes one, and I think that we'll start seeing them flood the market soon. But it's a great bit of technology for your. So now I'm going to send you
Aqara one.
Yeah, I've got the Aqara
good
one. And it's nice. It's nice. Does the job.
What I love about that, and I don't have one yet, so you'll have to tell me if this checks out. But how you can, and maybe this isn't as reliable as the presence itself, but how you can zone a room. So I was thinking one thing for my office here is if I'm in the office, the lights are on, depending on the time of the day, there is a certain percentage. But if I sit on my meditation cushion, which is in a kind of area in my office by the bookshelves, then the lights dim, then that's actually really all I need. Maybe the blinds closed as well, so there's fewer external distractions, or maybe halfway or something. Have you played around with that segmentation of areas of the room, or do you use the general presence?
So, and I hadn't explained it earlier, but you can do that. You can segment the room with the human presence sensor. So not only does it know if someone's in the room, it generally knows what area of the room they're in. So then you can make that a trigger, like Chris was saying, like if I go over to the meditation cushion, turn the lights down to 25% and blah, blah, blah.
If I'm in the chair by the lamp, turn the lamp on. Yeah.
That is more iffy in my experience, but this is kind of the first go at this. But to me, I'm just so happy that the lights turn on when I walk in and the lights turn off when I go out. I'm going to take that win right now. And I feel like the segmentation is promised, not fully delivered, but I feel like that will get here. That will get here soon. And then the question is like HomeKit. Is HomeKit going to have enough support for that, or are we going to have to go out to a whole different like Home Assistant type home automation technology that does a better job of addressing those different triggers? But there's a lot going on there. You just opened up a rabbit hole.
This is a whole other episode. It's funny. I just went to the page on Amazon for the Aqara sensor, and it says purchased December 2023. So this device exists somewhere. Yeah, but I don't know where it is.
I probably told you on one of our friend calls to get one.
Yeah, probably.
You probably ordered one. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's switch over to your book. I know we've been having a good time, but you are an accomplished author. Wall Street Journal says you're the most productive man in the galaxy, I think.
Oh.
What's bigger, the universe or the galaxy? I think
you're just making stuff up at this point.
I kind of am, to be perfectly honest. But when you go to write a book, I mean, something I've always liked about you, Chris, is you do have like simple workflows, but you get so much done with them. I mean, I'm imagining you do something similar with your book, but I'm not sure. How do you go about writing the text for your book?
Yeah. So this is something that I think I've internalized with workflows, which is that workflows exist to eliminate friction from what I have to do. And so, in the past, I've thought quite a bit about workflows and set up these complicated things. But then at some point, I hit a snag with something, and then the whole system was built like a house of cards. And so I don't want that in my life anymore. The maybe the older I get or something, I've realized that I just don't want friction. I don't want friction for writing. I want to be deliberate with where the friction exists. So, like for example, that this simple like unchecking the accounts in that mail dialogue thing, like you can set up a keyboard maestro script pretty easily. Check this box. Like it's great the kind of stuff you can do with it, but deliberate friction points is I just want no friction with the writing that I do. So for looking at the past, I wrote all three of my books, The Productivity Project, Hyperfocus, How to Calm Your Mind, in TextEdit. I love TextEdit. I would get a TextEdit tattoo. If that were actually, maybe I should. But I don't know if I could find a tattoo artist that would be the equivalent to the kind of person that carves words out on grains of rice that could really encapsulate all the beautiful words on that icon. I think what is it like? It's an old it was the Think Different ad copy that's on the TextEdit icon. Is that right?
Yeah.
I just love everything about this app. I use it constantly, but I really wanted less friction. I think last time I was on this podcast, I was just praying for a TextEdit version on the Mac or on the iPad rather, or on the iPhone. I would love this kind of application. It's so weird to me that in the Files app, when you tap an RTF document, that there isn't an app that opens that allows you to edit it. It's plain text. TextEdit is simple. It's probably built on Apple Silicon now. It could probably be made for the iPad relatively easily. Apple, please, Tim Cook Fairy, please make this happen. But so because of that friction point, where it was only available on the Mac, I put up with that for a very, very long time.
Yeah, I'd say longer than anybody else. You put up with that.
Yeah, probably. But I'm still using Simple Note, so I'm very much an N of one that is not generalizable to a more broad population. So I returned back to the app Bear. Are you familiar with this app?
Yeah, it's an excellent Markdown text editor.
Oh, I love it. So if somebody wants a markdown version of something, it's very easy to copy and paste. I can tell you in the publishing world, nobody wants a markdown version of anything, but that's okay. You can do a lot of other stuff too. Bear is on every single platform. It's the Simple Note of writing. It's simple and it's very elegant. I love the font in this app. I think I alluded to this a little bit earlier. The font is called Bear Sans. So it's a sans serif. It's a customized version of, I think, Clerica, if I remember. I don't know who made Clerica. I apologize if they're out there in the ether. But I kind of want to use this font for my next book. You know that thing you can do where you can right click on an application, you can show package contents, you can kind of root around a little bit. I was able to do that and found this font file, and now it is my default font in TextEdit as well. So I can experience Bear Sans in all of its glory. But I just love the friction-free aspect of it. So There really are sometimes when I'll be typing on my Mac, whether it's in cockpit mode or out in a coffee shop somewhere, and then I'll be in line somewhere, I'll be in an Uber or a cab going to an airport, waiting in line, whatever. And so I'll pull out my iPhone and it syncs almost immediately the entire book. It's text, and so it's not that big. And I can write on my iPhone with this app. And I know this is, it might not sound remarkable.
Yeah, I'm laughing because this is what a text edit guy would say when he gets an app that syncs words.
Yeah, I know. I realize this. I realize like what people will be like, oh man, who is this? Who is this fool? But when it's so elegant and when it's so beautiful and when it's so reliable, it's a different experience than just some app that syncs across platforms. It really is like an experience that syncs across platforms. So I love Bear, but yeah, I'm an N of one. Keep that in mind.
Yeah. Well, and you but you're writing a whole book in it. And that's kind of cool, right? I mean, how are you organizing? Because I mean, what is your book? Like 150,000 words? I'm like, I don't know. How long is it?
Yeah, it's 70,000.
Okay. See, I don't even know anymore, right?
Yeah, that's like 70,000 words is like a 250 page, 270 page book.
Yeah. All right. So a 500-page productivity book would be a bad idea. So I was off on that one. But obviously, you don't have like one page with 70,000 words in it. How are you putting it together, structurally in the app?
Yeah, so it's not just it's not just one document. Here, let me open it here. So I have the notes sorted by alphabetical order, and so if any, there's a chapter 0, which I think I'll actually keep in the finished book because I kind of like the idea of having a chapter 0. I think I had that in one of the previous books, and so they're alphabetical order by chapter. And at the very top, I just have a little note called underscore editing notes with all the different kind of structural changes I want to make to the manuscript, and then it's just numbered order after that point. And so each chapter is maybe like 7 to 10,000 words, depending on the chapter, broken down into the different subheads, and yeah, simple.
Yeah, and then once you get to the point that you bring editors in, you just send them the Bear file, right?
Yeah, I'm sure Nina would love that. No, the publishing industry is on the Word bandwagon.
Yeah.
My previous editor, he was okay with Google Docs, but man, that's a long Google Doc file. If you want to see Safari choke on something, put 70,000 words in a Google Doc.
Yeah. Yeah. So you export the markdown to rich text, drop it into Microsoft Word, and kind of at that point it's transitioned to the new platform.
Yeah, exactly. And so then I have to decide if I want to move everything back into Bear after I get the edits back, which it probably won't be worth doing, but I'll make a lot of different changes to the Word document to make it readable. The typography really kind of bugs me. So this font, just to turn this into more of a love fest for Bear.
Okay.
This font, Bear Sans, is the honestly the most beautiful font that I have ever encountered. It's called Bear Sans UI. It's like so it's the version that they use for the user interface of it. So I only see this font on a screen. I don't know what it's like printed or anything like that. But it's changing how I write. Because it's a very it's a smart looking font. It's a very it's elegant, it's smart, it's clean. Probably this sans nature, sans serif nature helps with that. But I find that the contrast between the different weights of the font is absolutely beautiful. The way that it's presented in the app with the spacing between paragraphs is beautiful. The italics is a really nice complement to the way the font usually appears. I could go on, David, but I will stop.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, because you keep talking about it so much, I installed it in Drafts. So I use it with Drafts, which
Oh, you
might
do?
be sacrilege. I'm not sure. Using bare
Oh
sounds in
man.
Drafts,
Well, it's definitely
I'm
a
not sure.
copyright violation.
Yeah, I'm not sure anybody would be happy with that. But yeah, it
No,
is a
nobody
very nice,
involved. Yeah.
it is a very nice font. I will agree.
Oh, it's beautiful.
But I do like the simplicity. Now, when you write, like for me, writing long things like this, because my brain is so like muddled, I do a lot of outlining and like thinking
Mm.
before I start writing words. Do you just sit down and start writing, or do you have like an outline or a mind map or something?
Oh, nobody wants what I would create if I just sat down and started writing.
Yeah.
um, I think that works great for little articles and stuff where you have an idea that you want to think through. With a nonfiction book, something that I found, I never know whether to count my Audible original thing as a book. It was never published as a hardback book, so I personally am hesitant, but my agent does, and so this will be my what, fifth book. I don't, I've lost count. But something that I've found with like organizing ideas is that when you have 70,000 words of ideas, they need an overarching architecture to them. And so I'm sure there are a lot of books out there, especially in the productivity space, maybe, that somebody just sits down and writes. But when something is research based, when there's a lot of information to gather and shape and mold it into something that is helpful and ultimately worthwhile to read and worth somebody's valuable time. That there needs to be a lot of forethought, and so I would say that. So if the point at which I begin writing a book is kind of on a timeline somewhere, that's the middle of the timeline of creating the book and setting aside all the editing that happens after finishing the manuscript. The amount of forethought that goes into creating the architecture of the book, creating how the ideas are not only part of that architecture, but also interrelated to one another inside of the book itself. That's kind of the first half, maybe sometimes a third of the process. And then the other 50 to 66% of the equation is the actual writing part. But something that I found from, definitely from the beginning, is that having that overarching architecture is completely invaluable for creating a product that deserves to live in the world. Because this book, it has to be deserving of being this beautiful bound hardcover book that's published by Penguin Random House, and the previous books are published in, I think, over 40 languages now, and so there's that reach that I want to. The Seth Godin, who is also a writer, he's in a different league than I am, in my opinion. But he has this whole philosophy where if you want to do better work, you get better clients. Because if you're working for Nike instead of the shoe shop down the street, you're gonna be more likely to deliver Nike level work. You're going to be more likely to deliver that Nike level collateral. And I think writing is the same, right? If your client is Penguin Random House, if you're publishing for a large audience, you're going to create a different product than if you're doing a self-published ebook kind of thing, which I have nothing against. I've done a self-published ebook before I started writing these kind of more general market books, but I really think the level of your client matters, and doing all that you can to increase that level is important. And so maybe on some level, I want my workflows to include that. Like I want to be, I want this text to be worthy of the font that they're written in. I want them to be worthy of the hardcover that they'll be published in. And I'll do all I can to create the conditions where I have no choice but to step up.
Yeah, I kind of have the same thing, but for me, I call it moving the needle. But I want the stuff I make to make an impact on the world. I want
Yeah.
people to actually use it, and I want to help somebody's life that I've never met.
Yeah.
And that to me drives the quality demand on myself quite a bit.
Yeah. And like it's a book. There's not a ton of money in writing books. Even at a huge scale, I think the amount that I would make per book is like $1.
Yeah.
It's not a lot for how much somebody pays. I don't know if that's exactly right, but I can make more money consulting, right?
Yeah.
But like this is like what actually makes a difference for people. And that's what the part of it that I love, that I wouldn't give up for anything. Like frankly, every day, I wake up and I think, man, I am the luckiest
Yeah.
person that I just get to explore this stuff and nerd out about this stuff, and for the benefit of other people, so that it actually helps them out, which helps me out because they buy future books, stuff like that. But that's ultimately the reason, right? It's like it's making that difference in how somebody works. It's exciting. It's what an opportunity.
I have the same feeling, Chris. I mean, my life has taken a
Yeah.
lot of turns, and at this point, I wake up and want to pinch myself. It's like, how did I get here? Because this was
Yeah.
none of this was intended, but I'm very
Yeah.
happy where I'm at.
So grateful. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Chris, if people are interested, where do they go and find out what you're up to?
Well, I got nothing to plug, baby. Well, I guess I have
I think
the
I would tell.
standard
All right,
stuff.
so I'm going to plug for you since you've been doing it for me.
Okay. Okay.
Everybody should go sign up for Chris's newsletter. It's excellent.
Mm.
And
Thank
that
you.
is a great place because eventually you're going to release your video course and you'll get news of it through that. And
Yeah.
you'll get more information on the new books, but it's also just a really great newsletter. And I enjoy reading it every time you publish. So where do they go to sign up for your newsletter?
ChrisBailey.com is where you can find that. And I do have a link to my books that are on there as well. My first one is called, I guess I do have stuff to plug. The Productivity Project is the first one. Hyper Focus is the second one. How to manage your attention. And the third one is How to Calm Your Mind, which is my personal favorite. Oddly, it's sold the least. People want productivity more than they want calm, but that is my favorite. I love that that's in the world, and the next one will come out eons from now, so don't even worry about it.
All right. We are the Mac Power Users. Stephen will be back soon. In the meantime, I want to thank Chris for coming on this week. The behind the scenes drama gang is I'm called for jury duty this week, but the way we do it in California is I never know when they're actually going to want me. So I'm like on call for jury duty. Chris has been very generous with his time and my moving schedule, but we still pulled it off. So thanks for that, Chris. I want to thank our friends at NetSuite and 1Password for sponsoring the show. For more power users, we're going to be talking about a little bit of analog journaling based on Chris's book because he got in my head. I want to explain that further. And because Stephen is not here, we're also going to talk about knife sharpening. So stick around if you'd like to join more power users. It's the ad-free extended version of the show. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.